A narcissist's entire game hinges on one thing: your need for their approval. It's not about love, connection, or partnership. It's about control, emotional control, mental control, sometimes even spiritual control. And they don't maintain that control through force. No, they do it through something far more deceptive: your desire to be accepted, understood, and validated by them. That desire becomes the hook. That craving for approval becomes the leash they use to walk you through a maze of confusion, manipulation, and emotional fatigue. The narcissist is a master of recognizing where your self-worth is fragile, and they exploit it. They know the exact words to say to make you question your value, and then they position themselves as the only one who can reaffirm it. So you stay, you explain, you overextend, you apologize for things you didn't do just to restore the peace. You go above and beyond to be seen as good enough for someone who has no intention of ever fully accepting you. It becomes a game you can't win because the rules are designed to keep you chasing, and that chase is fueled by approval. That maybe this time they'll appreciate me, mind. That is exactly what keeps the narcissist in power. As long as you believe that their validation is a reflection of your worth, they've got you. You'll bend over backward. You'll shrink yourself, you'll silence your truth just to avoid confrontation. You'll even start to confuse emotional abuse with passion, thinking their chaos is somehow proof of love. It's not love. It's a tactic, but something changes the moment you get tired. Not just physically tired, but soul tired. The moment you get sick of walking on eggshells. The moment you realize that no amount of performing, pleasing, or perfecting will ever satisfy a person who gets high on your insecurity. That's when the awakening begins. That's when clarity starts to break through the fog. You stop looking to them for validation. You stop needing them to say you're worthy. You stop waiting for them to finally recognize your loyalty, your sacrifice, your love. You realize it's not that they couldn't see it, it's that they never cared to, and that realization is what breaks the spell, because the real power was never in their hands, it was in your hunger. Your hunger for their approval gave them access to manipulate your mind. When that hunger dies, so does their influence. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It starts when you respond a little less, when their insults stop triggering a reaction, when you start honoring your own truth more than their opinion. When you start choosing your peace over their approval, you no longer feel the need to argue or explain or prove anything. You're no longer performing for a seat at a table you now realize was built on lies. That's the exact moment the narcissist feels it, the moment they know they've lost control. They feel it not through confrontation, but through indifference. They don't fear your anger, they fear your clarity. Because clarity leads to disconnection, and without the emotional connection, without you constantly needing to be seen or heard or validated, they have no leverage. That's why they may try harder at first. They may bomb you, guilt trip you, try to reel you back in with flattery or threats, because they know what's coming. They know that once you stop needing their approval, their control evaporates. That's when the shift happens inside of you. You start to see them for what they are: not a god to be worshipped, but a broken soul who fed off your light. And you start to see yourself for what you've always been: a whole person who just forgot their own worth for a moment. Now you walk different, talk different, move different, not in defiance but in alignment. You've remembered who you are, and you've decided that your self-worth is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer chase closure. You no longer need their apology, because the power they held was always borrowed from your own misunderstanding of your value, and when that misunderstanding is gone, so are they. Maybe not physically, maybe not immediately, but emotionally. They're gone. You're untouchable. They can't reach you in that place anymore, because you're no longer asking questions that only they could answer. You're no longer waiting on love from a place that never had it to give. You're not angry, you're free, and that is the exact moment a narcissist knows they've lost control. Not when you yell, not when you cry, not when you block them, but when you simply stop needing them to tell you who you are. A narcissist doesn't just manipulate with what they say, they manipulate with how they provoke you to respond. Their goal isn't always to control your actions directly, but to control your reactions. When they can get you to explain yourself, justify your feelings, or defend your truth, they win. Not because they're right, but because you've been pulled into their game, the game where logic doesn't matter, truth doesn't matter, and your emotions become evidence against you. It's a setup, and every time you take the bait, they gain ground. That's why silence is so powerful. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear, but the kind of silence that comes from clarity. The kind that says, I know exactly what this is, and I'm no longer available for it. When you stop justifying, explaining, or defending yourself, the narcissist's ability to manipulate starts to crumble. Their entire system of control is built on your engagement. The more you talk, the more they twist. The more you defend yourself, the more they flip the script. They accuse you of being too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. Yet it's all a distraction from the real issue, their behavior. They thrive on drama. They feed off confusion, but silence unsettles them. Silence is unpredictable. Silence forces them to sit with the reality they can no longer distort, because if you're not explaining yourself, they can't twist your words. If you're not defending your choices, they can't manipulate your guilt. If you're not reacting, they can't control the narrative. They want you emotional because emotions make you easier to control. When you're calm, centered, and silent, it sends a message they can't ignore. You are no longer playing by their rules. You've stepped out of the game. You're not participating in the performance anymore. And that drives them crazy, because it's not just about attention, it's about power, and silence is the ultimate power move. When you go silent, they may come at you harder. They might escalate, provoke, or even suddenly play the victim. They'll push every button they used to control, but here's the thing. They are no longer in control, they're flailing, their tools don't work anymore, and the silence isn't a wall. It's a boundary. It says, you no longer have access to me on your terms. You may have spent months or years thinking, if you could just find the right words, they'd finally understand. If you could just explain it clearly enough, maybe they'd see your heart. But narcissists don't misunderstand you. They strategically dismiss you. It's not ignorance, it's manipulation. They choose not to hear you because hearing you means giving up control. So when you finally stop trying to be heard by someone committed to misunderstanding you, that's when you reclaim your power. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's strength. It's the refusal to keep proving yourself to someone who already decided your voice doesn't matter. It's choosing your peace over their chaos. It's stepping into self-respect so firmly that their tactics bounce off you like rubber bullets. Your silence becomes louder than any speech you could ever give because it speaks of your healing, it speaks of your boundaries, it speaks of your self-worth, and that silence isn't empty, it's full of truth. It's full of power. It's full of the realization that you don't owe access to people who abuse your openness. You don't owe explanations to someone who only listens to gain control. You don't owe justification to someone who weaponizes your words. Silence says, I see you clearly now, and I'm done performing. The narcissist wants noise. They want conflict. They want you off, balance, and defensive. They want to keep you in a loop of trying to prove you're not the villain in their story. But the moment you stop showing up for that role, the story falls apart, the scene changes, the curtain closes, and they're left standing alone with the script they wrote, but no actor left to play their victim. You realize that peace is louder than argument, that presence is louder than words, that your stillness is the most disruptive thing you can offer to someone who used to dance in your emotional storms. Because now they can't trigger you, they can't bait you, they can't twist what you never said. They're trying to pick a fight with someone who's no longer in the arena. Silence isn't about giving up. It's about rising above. It's about valuing your energy so deeply that you no longer waste it trying to win a battle that was never yours to begin with. It's about recognizing that not every accusation deserves an answer, not every provocation deserves a performance, and not every manipulator deserves a microphone in your life. The real power isn't in shouting your truth at people who refuse to hear it. The real power is knowing your truth so deeply you don't need to say a word. Peace is not just a feeling, it's a force. It's not passive, it's not quiet, and it's not soft. Real peace, the kind that settles in your spirit and makes you walk differently, is a power that most narcissists can't stand to be around because peace is stable and narcissists can't thrive in stability. They need emotional turbulence to function, they need tension, they need confusion, arguments, drama, and chaos to keep you spinning in their cycle of control. When you step out of that chaos and into peace, it's like you've cut off their oxygen supply. They can't breathe in peace because they've only ever learned to live in dysfunction. What makes peace so disruptive to a narcissist is that it cannot be manipulated. Peace doesn't respond to their games. Peace doesn't flinch when they bait you. Peace doesn't explain or defend. It simply is. It doesn't need to prove anything, and when you're walking in peace, you are unreachable by the tactics that used to shake you. You're not ignoring the situation, you're just not inviting it into your mental and emotional space anymore. That terrifies them because chaos was their playground, it was where they had the advantage. But now that you're standing in peace, they are powerless. They will try to reintroduce chaos in subtle and aggressive ways, little digs, backhanded compliments, silent treatments, outbursts, triangulation. Anything that breaks your calm, because as long as you're emotionally triggered, you're easier to control, but the moment they can no longer disturb your peace, the spell breaks. Your emotional detachment isn't cold, it's sacred. It's the preservation of your sanity. It's the armor that guards your growth. Peace doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're powerful enough not to be pulled into war with someone who's already lost a battle within themselves. When you choose peace, you stop reacting. Not because you don't feel, but because you've learned to master your energy. You've realized that every argument isn't worth entering. Every accusation doesn't require a response. Every insult doesn't demand retaliation. You start to recognize how expensive your emotional investment is, and you no longer spend it on bankrupt relationships. This is not detachment from life, it's alignment with purpose. It's you deciding that your mind is not a battlefield for someone else's insecurity. The narcissist doesn't understand this kind of calm. They misread it as weakness or indifference, and they poke at it trying to get the old version of you to come out. The one who cried, yelled, begged, defended, explained, but that version of you no longer lives here. You've evolved, you've healed, and your peace is the evidence. It's the fruit of work they never saw you doing, the long nights, the prayers, the journaling, the therapy, the breaking and rebuilding of your own identity until you became a fortress of grace. Peace is powerful because it disconnects you from the emotional roller coaster they used to trap you on. It's not that the narcissist changed. You did. You woke up. You started guarding your heart. You started listening to your intuition. You started trusting your boundaries, and most importantly, you stopped making space for emotional chaos in your life. That was the turning point, not a dramatic exit, not a big confrontation, just a quiet decision to no longer allow dysfunction to sit at your table. They don't fear your anger. Anger is familiar to them. They know how to respond to it, manipulate it, even mirror it. But peace confuses them. Peace is unpredictable to them. Peace signals that you've unplugged from their cycle. And they don't know what to do when they can't provoke you. When you remain calm in the face of their storm, it exposes their instability. It reflects the chaos back to them in a way that is undeniable. Suddenly, they're the only one screaming, accusing, gaslighting. You're just standing there, grounded, not reacting. That contrast is painful for them because it reveals who they really are. You don't need to raise your voice to reclaim your power. You don't need to fight to prove you're strong. Your peace says everything. It says you've done the inner work. It says you value your mental health. It says you know your worth. And more than anything, it says you are no longer a willing participant in emotional warfare. They can't win a battle you refuse to fight. They can't manipulate a calm they can't access. They can't twist a narrative you've stopped contributing to. Choosing peace is not easy. It requires discipline. It requires healing. It requires letting go of the need to be right, to be heard, to be vindicated. It means surrendering the desire for revenge and replacing it with the desire for freedom. And freedom always begins with peace. The narcissist will never find peace because they're still trying to win wars that exist only in their mind. But once you taste real peace, you'll never go back to the chaos that once felt like love. Because peace doesn't just feel good, it is good. It's the proof that you've finally come home to yourself. Healing is the moment everything changes, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it's permanent. It's the quiet unfolding of a new you that the narcissist never expected to meet. A healed version of you isn't just stronger, it's unavailable to manipulation. That's what makes healing the greatest threat to a narcissist. It's not that you stop feeling, it's that you stop needing them to make you feel whole. The codependency breaks, the emotional supply dries up, the confusion lifts, and suddenly the person they had all this power over is no longer responding the way they used to. Healing doesn't come with flashing lights. It comes in moments, little shifts. You stop texting back so fast. You pause before explaining yourself. You start checking in with your own truth before accepting theirs. You begin to listen to your intuition again, the one they convinced you to ignore. You take your power back, piece by piece, until one day you look around and realize they no longer sit in the center of your life. You no longer build your peace around their approval. You're no longer measuring your worth based on how they treat you. That's when it happens. The narcissist senses it, that subtle, unstoppable process called healing. They try to test it. They poke at it. They show up again with charm, confusion, guilt, or anger. They use every tool they once wielded like a sword, but healing changes how those tools affect you. What used to trigger you now makes you pause. What used to make you doubt yourself now confirms what you've always known. Healing turns your history into wisdom. You no longer forget what they did just because they say something sweet. You remember. You forgive yourself, and you move differently. That movement is what they fear most. Narcissists don't know how to function around healed people because a healed person is deeply rooted. They can't be shaken by gaslighting. They don't chase closure, they don't beg to be understood, and they definitely don't keep explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. Healing means you've faced the parts of you that used to keep you in toxic cycles. You've asked hard questions, you've looked at your wounds not with shame but with grace. You've stopped hiding from the truth and started living in it. The version of you that stayed, tolerated, justified, and absorbed pain is no longer here. That version died in the fire, and what emerged is someone who no longer sees the narcissist as powerful, because they never really were. What made them powerful was your brokenness, your hope that they could change. Your belief that if you loved harder, explained better, waited longer, they'd finally see you, but they weren't blind. They were willfully avoiding accountability. Your healing shines a spotlight on that avoidance. When you get healthy, their dysfunction has no place to hide. That's why they either lash out or disappear when you heal. They can't survive in a space where they can't control the narrative, and healing rewrites the narrative completely. It changes you from victim to victor, from confused to clear, from desperate to discerning. Healing doesn't make you perfect, it makes you powerful. You still have feelings, but you're no longer ruled by them. You still have compassion, but you're no longer consumed by it. You can still love, but you've learned to love yourself first. That shift is deadly to someone who relied on yourself. Betrayal. You're no longer handing out chances like candy. You're not romanticizing potential anymore. You're not sacrificing your peace to keep the relationship alive, because you now understand that real love doesn't cost you your sanity. Real connection doesn't require constant compromise of your boundaries. The narcissist doesn't know what to do with that. Their usual tactics fall flat. Their charm feels empty. Their anger feels desperate. Their silence feels like peace. You don't respond with panic. You respond with purpose. You've seen behind the curtain now. You've connected the dots. You've reclaimed your narrative. And more than anything, you've realized that healing isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. Free from the need to fix, to prove, to be chosen. Because you've already chosen yourself, that's what breaks the cycle, that's what removes the hook. The narcissist thrives when you're broken and seeking wholeness through them, but when you become whole on your own, their power evaporates. Not because they changed, but because you did. They no longer recognize the healed version of you, and that's the point. You weren't meant to stay small, confused, dependent. You were meant to grow, expand, rise. Healing is what makes that possible, and when you heal, you stop being a character in their story and start writing your own. Healing is the mirror they can't look into. It shows them everything they've tried to deny, not about you, but about themselves. That's why your healing is their defeat, because it proves they never had the power. They only borrowed it from the parts of you that didn't yet know your worth. Now that you do, there's nothing left for them to take. No buttons to push, no wounds to poke, just you, whole, steady, and free. The moment you stop seeing the narcissist as powerful is the moment everything begins to shift. It's not about denying the pain they caused or pretending the manipulation never happened. It's about seeing it clearly, without the fog of emotional dependency or self-doubt. When you're under their control, they appear larger than life. Every word they speak seems important. Every mood swing feels like your responsibility. Their silence, their approval, their disapproval, it all controls how you feel about yourself. That illusion of power is what keeps you locked in, but the truth is they were never powerful. They were simply strategic with your insecurities. A narcissist's control depends entirely on perception. They don't have actual strength. They manipulate your vision until you start seeing them as your emotional authority. They become the standard for what love feels like, even though what they give isn't love, it's possession. They convince you that they know you better than you know yourself, that without them you'll never be enough. They break you down, then position themselves as the only one who can build you back up. That dynamic creates a false sense of power, but the moment you step back, the moment you pause and look at them without the emotional haze, you begin to realize they're not powerful at all. They're just broken people using control to cover their own wounds. The real shift happens when you start seeing their tactics as predictable, when you can spot the gaslighting for what it is, when you know that the sudden praise is just bait, when you hear the apology and immediately recognize the manipulation hidden inside it. You stop being shocked by their behavior. You stop taking their words personally. You stop needing them to be different because you've accepted they won't be. That acceptance is what dissolves the illusion. You no longer see them as a giant. You see them as small. It's not about revenge or hatred. It's about clarity. Clarity brings peace. Clarity brings distance. Clarity brings you back to yourself. You start to question the power you thought they had. You realize they didn't break you. You gave them access during a time you didn't know how to protect your heart. That awareness shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, they're not the source of your validation. They're not the ones who define your worth. They're just people, flawed, wounded, and feeding off chaos because they never learned how to face themselves. You start to notice that their insults say more about them than they do about you. That their accusations are projections, that their anger is a shield for their own fear, that their superiority is a mask for their insecurity. The mask slips the moment you stop needing it to stay in place. You no longer care to fix them. You no longer see them as someone to rescue. You no longer idolize their attention or dread their rejection. It's not indifference, it's empowerment. You've reclaimed your emotional territory. The most dangerous thing to a narcissist is someone who sees through them, because once you see through them, you stop feeding them, you stop reacting, you stop doubting your own voice, you stop participating in the performance. They lose their audience, and without an audience, their entire act collapses. You no longer respond to the chaos with anxiety. You meet it with silence. You no longer try to decode their mixed signals. You no longer need them to understand your heart because you've already understood it yourself. That internal shift is what changes everything. You begin to see your own patterns. You recognize the wounds that made you susceptible to their charm. You do the inner work. You stop blaming yourself for being vulnerable and start honoring yourself for having the courage to heal. That healing gives you perspective. You see the narcissist not as a monster, but as a deeply unhealed person who created destruction because they didn't know how to deal with their own pain. That perspective allows you to release the anger. And in that release, you reclaim your power. Your power was never in controlling them. Your power was in freeing yourself, in learning the lessons, in breaking the cycle, in refusing to let the pain turn you bitter. You rise not because you won the battle, but because you realized you didn't need to fight it in the first place. You don't win by proving them wrong. You win by proving yourself right about your worth, your truth, your boundaries, your voice. The narcissist's power was always an illusion. They never had control of your soul. They just exploited the parts of you that were still healing. And now that you've done the work, now that you've faced your reflection and reclaimed your truth, they don't get to sit on the throne of your mind anymore. You've taken back that seat. You're no longer controlled by fear, guilt, or longing. You're led by clarity, grounded in self-respect and anchored in peace, and nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone who's no longer afraid of losing them, because that's when they know they never had power at all.